So the only way to have the abundant life is to live the principles. There are laws in which we can live by.
Reverend Dr. Barbara Lewis King was the minister and founder of Atlanta's Hillside Chapel and Truth Center. A civil rights leader, she worked in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Chicago movement. An ordained minister and social work administrator, this global charismatic teacher authored 10 books and hosted her own television show. This beloved trailblazer was honored in 2019 when the Atlanta City Council voted unanimously to rename the Interfaith Chapel at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson Airport the Dr. Barbara Lewis King Interfaith Chapel. I'm Atlanta City Council member Antonio Brown. The legacy lives.
Now, you didn't think you'd sit through an address from a psychiatrist and not hear something about fantasies and dreams, did you? But the great thing about psychiatrists is that we can talk about dreams and fantasies as well as the hippocampus and the cytochrome P450 system.
Dr. Patrice Harris made history in 2019, becoming the first black woman elected as president of the American Medical Association. A child psychiatrist, Harris completed her residency at the Emory University School of Medicine. She is a former county public health director and a devoted patient advocate. Harris led the AMA's charge to end the horrific opioid epidemic. She has chaired the Opioid Task Force since 2014. A renowned expert on children's mental health and childhood trauma, Dr. Harris used her platform to shed light on the importance of getting help for depression and anxiety, while bringing attention to health disparities during the COVID-19 crisis. I'm Phyllis Jackson. The legacy lives.
Carolyn Long Banks is the first black woman to be appointed and elected to the Atlanta City Council. An important part of Atlanta history, Banks was among a group of Atlanta University students forming the Committee on the Appeal for Human Rights, known as the Atlanta Student Movement. Banks and others committed to nonviolence took part in sit-ins at local segregated lunch counters and cafeterias in the Georgia State Capitol, as well as area restaurants that turned black patrons away. Their courageous acts would open the doors to desegregation of Atlanta's businesses, schools, and medical facilities. Carolyn Long Banks served the city of Atlanta from 1980 to 1997. I'm Atlanta City Council member Amir Farouqi. The legacy lives.
Marvin Stevens Arrington Sr. made an unforgettable mark on the city of Atlanta. He was elected to the Atlanta Board of Aldermen in 1969. The name of that legislative body was changed to the Atlanta City Council in 1974. Arrington served as council president for 17 years. Among many other important causes, Arrington fought diligently to address issues of discrimination and led the charge to require the recording of all standing committee meetings and city council meetings. He also courageously appointed a woman to chair the Finance Committee. After stepping down from the council, his service to the city continued. In 2002, Governor Roy Barnes appointed Arrington to become Fulton County Superior Court Judge, where he served for 10 years before retiring. Arrington's dedication and commitment to serve would not go unnoticed. In 2019, the Atlanta City Council voted unanimously to rename the council chamber in his honor. I am Atlanta City Council President Felicia Moore. The legacy lives.
Welcome to this edition of Stay at Home Connect. I'm Phyllis Jackson. While promoting his COVID-19 relief plan, President Biden says that 600 million doses of the coronavirus vaccine will be available by the end of July. FEMA launches the opening of its first COVID-19 vaccination sites in Los Angeles and Oakland as part of the Biden administration's plan to pick up the pace of vaccine distribution. The winter weather is hindering vaccination efforts in many states, including here in Georgia. In a release, the Georgia Department of Public Health says it received notice from the CDC that Pfizer and Moderna vaccines that should have arrived earlier this week were held back by the manufacturers due to the weather. Delays are expected to continue through the week. Many providers are rescheduling appointments. Officials with the Department of Public Health are asking for patience as they wait for weather conditions to improve and shipments to resume. Doctors are concerned about an increase of an extremely rare multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children after exposure to COVID-19. The condition leads to inflammation of the body's major organs. Here's what you need to know. The CDC has a list of symptoms that you should be aware of. Not all children will have the same symptoms. Among the more serious, trouble breathing, chest pain, or pressure that doesn't go away, along with severe abdominal pain. For a full list of symptoms of multisystem inflammatory syndrome, you can go to the CDC's website at cdc.gov. That's a wrap. We'll see you on the next edition of Stay at Home Connect.
The Atlanta Police Department saw major change in 1948 when it hired its first black police officers. Soon to come along in its ranks in 1950 was Claude Everett Mundy. While responding to a burglary on January 5, 1961, on Parkway Drive, Officer Mundy became the first black officer to be shot and killed in the line of duty. Officer Mundy was 39 years old and left behind a wife and 5 children. He was recently honored with a proclamation during the 60th commemoration of his death. His family was there celebrating his life and his undeniable bravery. I'm Atlanta City Council member Michael Julian Bond. The legacy lives.
All right, it is 1:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. This is Jennifer I, the Chair of the Finance Executive Committee. Today is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. It's 1:30 p.m. This is our regularly scheduled committee meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I know that with us today we have council members Joyce Shepard, Madeline Archibong, J.P. Matsakite, and Matt Westmoreland, and I believe that Councilmember Andre Dickens was not available today. So is Mr. Shook with us? Right. Well, I believe that Mr. Shook will be joining us. So when he gets here, I will recognize him then. Ms. Simpson-Wright, can you read the remote meeting statement for me, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. This Finance Executive Committee meeting is being conducted remotely as advertised and is in accordance with the official code of Georgia 5014-1. The meeting will be conducted in conformance with Robert's Rules of Order and the Rules of Council as authorized by the City Code. The public may access the meeting by the following conference bridge: toll-free access 877-579-6743, conference ID 831-599-1256, which was noted on the Friday, February public meeting notice. The public may also view the meeting on Channel 26, citycouncilatlanta.gov, or the Council's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter pages at ATL Council. All presentations are available on the Atlanta City Council Finance Executive Committee presentation page. The agenda was published and made available on Friday, February 19th via AtlantaCityGA.iqm2.com. Public comment was accepted between the hours of 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. on yesterday, Tuesday, February 23rd. All persons present on the remote council meeting conference bridge are requested to mute your phones and speakers. Additionally, speakers must be acknowledged by the presiding officer prior to speaking. Each council member is requested to open your Outlook email and minimize the screen. Amendments, substitutes, and informational documents were distributed to committee members earlier. Thank you in advance for your cooperation.
Thank you, Ms. Kempson-Wright, and I have gotten a message from Mr. Shook that he has been able to join us. I think he's still trying to deal with the technology issue, but he is on the line. We need to approve our minutes from our last meeting, so I'll make a motion to do that.
Shook seconds.
All right, let's open the vote on the approving the minutes.
Madam Chair,
I went out of order on that, didn't I? Okay. So first, let's adopt our agenda. I do not believe we have any walk-ins when we get to our regular agenda. I am going to rearrange the order we go in a little bit to accommodate some people's schedules, but we don't need to amend the agenda to do that, do we, Ms. Kempson-Wright?
No, you don't need to amend the agenda.
Okay. All right, then I'll make a motion to adopt our agenda.
The vote is open.
Second.
Yeah, this is Archibong. I'm not able to log on yet. I vote yes.
All right. That is favorable. 6 yeses, 0 no's. Our agenda has been adopted. Now we'll move on to approving our minutes from our last meeting. Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Shook seconds.
Let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
Archibong votes yes.
That is 6 yeses, 0 no's. Our minutes have been adopted. We did have one caller today, so let's go to our public comment, please.
One moment.
Greetings to you, committee members and staff, and special greetings to you, citizens and voters of Atlanta. who have tuned into these proceedings and are taking note of the degree to which public comments made by citizens are being honored or ignored. Ben Howard, Senior Advocate, Public Policy Analyst. Neighborhood Planning Unit R allows no committee reports, and especially no reports dealing with finance. So let's talk finance, NPUR 9. Let's talk about why you allow no reports from the Campbellton Road Business and Merchants Association, even though those members pay dues of $100 a year. Let's talk finance. How many members of the NPUR 9, like Alfred White and Sherry Williams, get to have their projects funded when city dollars and why so few other citizens' projects are accepted? Let's talk finance, NPUR 9. Let's talk about why Renette L. Scott's so-called CANIT program to clean up Campbellton Road got funded when all along members of Mount Carmel Baptist Church had adopted Campbellton Road as their cleanup project, not paid for out of city funds. Let's talk finance, NPUR 9. Let's talk about why you allow no financial reports about the Cascade Nature Preserve or Adams Park. Let's talk finances, NPUR 9. Let's talk about the money that was given to Antonita Robinson to help protect people against the coronavirus and why still she has not publicly provided any final report. Let's talk finance, NPUR 9. Let's talk about why Ricardo Jacobs is not giving financial reports as the representative for the Campbellton Road Tax Allocation District, and also no reports on the Invest in Southwest Atlanta program. Let's talk finance in 2021. On behalf of the citizens of NPUR, NPUR 9 Vice Chair Antonita Robinson, Paulus Clare, Ricardo Jacobs, Albert White, Annette L. Scott, Allison Hathaway, Sherry Williams, and UNPUR 9 cohorts and supporters. Let's talk finance.
All right. Thank you. It's always good to hear from Mr. Howard. We have 3 presentations for updates today. We're going to start with our transparency update from our Chief Transparency Officer, Kristen Denny.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I have a slide presentation for you guys today, and I want to thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come before you and provide some updates. I think I was supposed to come last time in December, and we had a lot of things that were in process at the time, but now I'm happy to be able to report on those things. So if we can move to the next slide past the title page. Just a quick reiteration of our status of public record requests during City Hall closure. We are still receiving and responding to requests for public records under the Open Records Act. That is being handled primarily electronically. We are still receiving some very few requests via U.S. mail. Those are being routed as they normally would. Sometimes the responses are a little bit slower because of the process, but people are very understanding and patient with us. There are open records coordinators within each department, and they have dedicated open records email inboxes that they are able to access remotely in order to receive and respond to requests that way. Occasionally, we will receive requests for records that only exist in hard copy that are located at City Hall, and of course, as you know, access to the building is limited at this time. And so our ability to provide access to hard copy records is just delayed. And again, people are being very understanding with that. We have to have staff able to schedule a time to come to the building and access those documents, but that process is occurring. Finally, one of the things that I have been working on is an update to my transparency webpage. That webpage provides resources for individuals, both internal within the city and external in our community, who are seeking records or who are in need of assistance. And so what I'm going to do in the next few slides is show you some of the content on that webpage so that you can be familiar with it. Next slide, please. So this next slide is a screenshot of the City of Atlanta main webpage just to show everyone where to access the transparency website. So you'll see there's a red circle around the I want to ... tab at the top right-hand corner of the page. And if you hover over that, you get this darker blue drop-down box, and Request Open Records is the link that you would want to select, and that's indicated with the red arrow. Next slide, please. So when you click on that link, you will get to my transparency webpage. This is the top of the page. You'll see my happy smiling face looking at you, and this is just the language at the top of the page, but I wanted to show you what it looks like. Next slide, please. When you continue to scroll down, you get really to the informational content on the page. So at the top, there is a segment where it talks about how to request public records. There is a link that allows people to access an alphabetic listing of all of our city departments and the contact information for the designated open records officer for each of those. That contact information includes email, e-fax, and telephone number. The telephone number component of that is a little tricky right now since people are not in the building to answer the phones. So we really do prefer that people use the email or the e-fax. And if somebody needs to speak to an individual, they can always just call me. Below the requesting public records, I have a spot where I provide links to all of the updates that I provide to this committee. So there are 2 active links there for the 2 previous updates that I've provided, and the one link that will be updated following this presentation to include a link to this PowerPoint document that we are looking at right now. The next segment is frequently asked questions. There are a handful of them here that if someone were to click on the little arrow off to the side, it drops down an answer to each one. If you or anyone that you know of has a question that you think would be valuable to have the answer to on here, I would love to know about it. This is a living, breathing website. Unfortunately, AIM is probably tired of me at this point because I keep trying to add content, but I would love to add additional FAQs if anybody has some that they would like to see. Next slide, please. So this is the bottom of the page. Luckily, it's not that long yet, but I've also included links to applicable laws. So you'll see a link to the Georgia Open Records Act itself, and also a link to the Atlanta City Code Chapter 3, which is our transparency section. And then below that are links to applicable City of Atlanta policies and procedures around transparency. So the Open Records Compliance Policy, our email search and retrieval protocol, which is something that we use internally. It sets forth the process by which our employees access and retrieve emails in response to an open records request. And so that is on there as well. It was recently updated to reflect just a new internal AIM contact. I also have links here to the records management policy for the City of Atlanta and our retention schedules. And those are documents that are maintained by finance, but they do impact the access to public records, and so I put them on here as well. The compliance training materials, I will be updating those as I create new ones, but currently these are the 2 that I use when I do training. And I've provided a link to the Georgia Attorney General's office website for people who may feel a need to contact them. And finally, at the very end, I've just provided another link to our list of open records contact individuals within the city, so that people can have access to those. I'm trying to make it clear that I personally am not the custodian of public records, but I am a resource in order to connect people with those appropriate custodians. And so I do field those calls frequently. Next slide, please. So the other thing that I want to provide you all with an update on is the procurement project to identify and select open records management software, which will create a citywide open records portal for people to use and for us to use to respond to requests. That was advertised, RFP was advertised in April of last year, so almost a year ago. Things were a little slow due to the pandemic. This was actually the first RFP that procurement did kind of from beginning to end in the virtual world. So there were some things that had to be smoothed out and figured out as we proceeded through that process. But we did receive proposals in August, And we were able to do evaluations of those proposals in December. We had a cross-departmental team that conducted those evaluations because, of course, the software will be implemented across the city, and we wanted to make sure to have input from all of our various stakeholders with their different needs around records and different types of records and databases. So that was successful, and I'm pleased to announce that we have submitted a recommendation for award to the Chief Procurement Officer. We're not at the point of the process where I can tell you who it is, but we hope to be bringing forward legislation probably for cycle 8 very soon for you all to hopefully approve. Next slide, please. And finally, just a quick update on open records compliance training that I'm doing. I have new employee orientation now has been converted into a virtual module that is a component of the virtual new employee orientation. And so that is continuing as we onboard new employees. I'm also working in parallel with the Department of Human Resources to develop a standalone online training module that would be for annual training of all employees, similar to what we all do around cybersecurity and ethics. So those are the two models that I'm using in that endeavor. And then also, as always, I'm available to conduct departmental compliance training. Of course, in this environment, it's virtual and it's via Teams, but I do those pretty regularly on demand for different departments or functional areas around the city. So next slide, last slide. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody may have.
All right, colleagues, does anybody have questions for Ms. Dennis? And I do want to acknowledge we've been joined by Council President Felicia Moore as well. All right, I am not seeing anybody raise their hand. So thank you so much for being here with us, Ms. Dennis, and catching us up on everything you've been doing. And we, as always, appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
All right. Next presentation or report we're going to move to is the COVID-19 funds report.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jerry Delos. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is the February 2021 City of Atlanta COVID-19 funds report. Next slide, please. There's no change in the second slide. It just indicates the reporting requirements as authorized by legislation passed by the council. Next slide, please. Slide 3 is a summary of all federal funds that have been received by the City of Atlanta thus far. The only addition is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, down about 6 positions. It's the additional $15.25 million that we have received from the United States Department of Treasury for emergency rental assistance. That's just an acknowledgement of those funds that have been received by the city. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the spend that has taken place with the original $88.4 million that the city received. Currently, we have obligated $82.7 million of that. In terms of actual costs, we have actually spent $59.8 million, and the available balance right now stands at about $5.6 million. As you can see on the far left-hand side, there's very little money left to spend. Most of that is in the consultant line. We intend by the end of this week to request invoices from 4 major external partners, including Invest Atlanta, United Way, Partners from Home, and Fulton County Board of Health, to provide them with the last remaining sums that are available to them. And hopefully those funds will be made available to them no later than Friday, but hopefully no later than Monday of next week. Next slide, please. This slide shows the FAA CARES spending breakdown for the funds that are being managed by the Department of Aviation. The original funded amount was $338.5 million. DOA had obligated costs of $142.7 million. They have actual costs of $142.7 million, and they have an available balance of $195.7 million. Primarily, those expenses incur personnel expenses and employee benefits, $5.9 million, And actually, the $782 should have been rolled up into personnel services because they are related to personnel services. Consulting services have consisted of $28.9 million, and they have spent approximately $107.9 million for debt service. Next slide, please. We are required by legislation to provide an accounting for nonprofit and philanthropic organizations. There is no change on this from the original from last month. Next slide, please. We're also required to provide a detailed summary to assist the Ethics Office, and slides 7, 8, and 9 provide the detailed information that we're required to provide by legislation. It's 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11. And then slide 12 provides the overview of expenditures and how those funds, how those expenditures are being paid for, and the source of the funding for those expenditures. If you'll note at the bottom, we do make a note that originally when we were reported to council, we were dividing FEMA reimbursement from a 75% FEMA reimbursement to a 25% city cost share. But on January 21st, 2021, FEMA gave notice that they were now matching 100% of eligible costs. And so all of the expenses that we submit to FEMA that are deemed to be eligible, we expect that we will receive 100% funding from FEMA for that. The first set of numbers reflect the executive ordinance, which established our programs very early in the beginning. There's no change in those programs. The second set of numbers for executive ordinance 20-0-1332, there's no change in that. Next column, which deals with COVID-19 other expenses, there is approximately about $400 additional of expenses that have been incurred by the departments from their own budget. In addition to that, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have also incurred in this batch here an additional $11 million that consists of funds that were sent to United Way, Partners for Home, Invest Atlanta, and also for the hotels that we're providing for the homeless population. The next column talks about the hazardous pay and other personnel expenses. There's no change in that, but I will take note that we have approximately $1.8 million left in the original $15 million for hazardous pay. We will transfer that $1.8 million to expenses that have been incurred by the city for hazardous pay on Friday, and that will be reflected in our report that we present in March of this year. Are there any questions? All right, and that concludes our report for February of 2021.
Madam Chair, you might be muted.
Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. My line got dropped somehow. I'm assuming the presentation wrapped up, and Mr. Westmoreland was first in line to speak.
Yeah, one question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Deloach, the $15 million additional dollars for rental assistance, when did that come in and who is overseeing its disbursement?
That came in January 24th, if I'm not mistaken. Those funds will be administered out of the mayor's office for emergency rental assistance. Legislation hasn't been prepared, but I don't think it has appeared on the council agenda yet.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Matsukai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around the airport spend. It seems like we have a pretty big balance there that's available to be spent. Are there plans? Are there plans to spend that, or can that be spent? What's happening with that?
One of the major differences between the original CARES money that the city received and the FAA money They have a longer period of time to spend their money. So they do have a very well thought out plan in the sense of over the period of time that they have to spend their money and how they will spend that money. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have 3 years to spend theirs. But I will double check on that period of time. But I know it's more than the original 6 months that we had.
Is John Selden, General Manager of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, available to speak to this?
1 minute.
I know.
Just 1 moment, please.
John Selden, General Manager, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Hello, all.
Hello. Mr. Selden, this is Councilmember Matsakite. I'm not sure if you heard my question. It's around the federal money that you've been given the FAA. You've got a pretty big balance, and I just wanted to understand from you, what were the thoughts about spending that money or not spending it?
Sure. We received so far somewhere around a little over $400 million, and we haven't received it, Councilman Matsakite. It's in the FAA's hands. And what we do is, and I think you know this, we submit our operating and maintenance bills and the things that are not being funded normally because we do not have the revenue. So we pay the bill and then we submit the invoice to the FAA, and they give us the money to keep the airport operating safely, secure, and in top condition. So we have spent, just off the top of my head without even thinking, somewhere we're going to be right around $180 million of that, and then we have our debt service payments coming up going forward, which are significant chunks of money to do that. And that's really, the CARES money has been provided for that. In the last tranche of money we got back in December, we got 87 million of that, and about 11, almost 12 million of it is set aside for the concessionaires. And what that will do is right now we're charging them very little rent, which is based on the number of employments reduction from their percentage rent, which normally would be 12% of their gross sales, and the MAGs have all been waived, and they're paying a small percentage of their percentage rent. But with those dollars, we plan on waiving all rents for concessionaires. They will pay no rents, and it'll be allocated based on the revenues that they have received in based on their gross sales in 2019, it'll be percentages. So a Delaware North may get 20% of the money, and another concessionaire may get 15%, and so on and so forth. And once their rent has once the small percentage rent that they're paying now reaches that level of that allocation, they'll go back to paying it. So basically, we're going to try to bring all of our concessions business back online. And the FAA said anybody who is open or nearing being open would be eligible for these dollars going forward. The rest of the money, we are going to continue to look at ways to bring our business back by reducing possibly looking at our terminal rents, our landing fees, and obviously you heard the piece about our concessionaires, and also reducing parking to continue to keep our parking contractors and keep our parking lots full. We may use some dollars to take that revenue loss that we're losing, and we'll pay our bills and make ourselves very competitive in the market from a business perspective to keep Hartsfield-Jackson a very low-cost airport to operate of, not only from an airline perspective, but for a passenger perspective.
That's great. Do you anticipate spending all of the money that has been allocated to you?
Yes, sir. We have 4 years to spend it, and we certainly will spend it in those 4 years. The goal is not to like I said, take the business model to no-cost airport and use all those dollars and not generate money in an attempt that you may bring the people back during this time, because right now people are still very hesitant about travel. The population has not been inoculated. Herd herd immunity has not been established. So we have a long way to go here to bring our business back. So we're going to be, we have an airport for 115 million passengers here and 2,800 flights a day. And we're about 50% of that from a passenger perspective. So we have a long way to go to get our business, to keep our business model intact. And we're going to use these dollars over the next year or two or maybe 3 here to keep our business model intact and pay our bills with the lost revenue that we're not getting.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Matsakite. Any other questions on the COVID funds report? All right, then we will move along to Ms. Daniel with the fiscal year 21 monthly general fund revenue report.
Good afternoon. This is Felicia Daniel in Finance. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. This FY21 monthly general fund revenue report for January is prepared pursuant to 20-R-4006, which requires that Finance provide an update to the Finance Executive Committee at the second regularly scheduled meeting of each month, and reporting shall contain detailed information regarding collections for each of the general fund revenue streams and how collections compare to budgeted revenue. This presentation begins with a listing of general fund major revenue categories and their FY21 adopted budget amounts. The FY21 adopted general fund budget is $680 million, which includes a $41 million supplement from fund balance. Next, a comparison of FY21 January projections year-to-date versus FY21 January actuals year-to-date, which represents 7 months of FY21. In total, January year-to-date actuals are $459 million, which are lower than year-to-date projections of $462 million, by $3 million negative variance. An analysis of the major categories, the major factors by category is as follows. The property tax variance of $8 million is higher than budget. January property tax collections were over $3 million. The year-to-year January comparison shows that we have collected almost $4 million more this year at $221 million versus $217 million last year, even though Fulton's property tax due date was a month later this year. We fully expect to achieve the full property tax budget of $232 million over the next 5-month horizon. Local option sales tax is trending higher than year-to-date projections by $5.9 million. The FY21 7-month average is $9.8 million compared to FY20 7-month average of $10.3 million. Although we have not quite achieved pre-pandemic collections, we are only $500,000 off the FY20 pre-pandemic 7-month average. Sales tax continues to be a bright spot in general fund revenue collections and underscores a healthy underlying economy despite the challenges of the pandemic. The public utility and alcohol category includes 15 active revenue streams with varying cycles of receipts. Excuse me. As such, this major revenue category does not conform to a straight line methodology. This category includes public utility franchise fees, alcohol excise taxes, which are significantly impacted by COVID, and taxes on motor vehicle sales, which in total contribute to a negative January variance of $1.9 million. Licenses and permits revenue is lower than year-to-date projections by $5.8 million. The primary driver is due to slower alcohol license receipts. Through January, the budget for alcohol licenses is $9.3 million versus actual revenues of only $3 million. It is well documented that the hospitality and restaurant industry has been heavily impacted by COVID. businesses are beset with financial challenges with sustaining their operations. Fines and penalties shows a negative variance of $3.6 million, which is directly related to the previous COVID-induced closure of city courts and lower traffic violations and parking enforcement, where the number of citations in the pipeline decreased dramatically. Hotel motel negative variance of $6.5 million is directly related to the depressed demand stemming from COVID-19. The erosion of business, convention, and tourism activity has reduced demand, hotel occupancy, and thus results in lower room rates. Economists anticipate this trend to continue until a vaccine is readily available to all population groups and consumer confidence in traveling rebounds. The last two columns compare FY20 year-to-date actuals to FY21 year-to-date actuals and show a negative variance of $7 million. Obviously, last year's revenues were not impacted by COVID and are higher than current year. The FY21 budget includes COVID-related revenue impacts. As of January, and in congruence with previous month reporting and narrative, the categories that continue to be a clear and present risk to general fund revenue reside in alcohol beverage, fines, penalties, licenses, and hotel motel revenue. This ends the January revenue report presentation, and of course, I yield to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dino. Colleagues, does anybody have questions about our monthly update? I don't see anybody putting their hand up. I have a question, and Ms. Daniel, you can let Mr. Counsel answer this if you'd rather. But how are you all? How are you all feeling if we're, about catching up on revenue as we, are in the second half of this fiscal year?
I am quiet. There you go.
Okay. No, it's okay, Ms.
Mr. CFO. Yes.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for your silence, Ms. Daniels. So we're expecting a trend, okay? And the trend is probably going to be a negative trend. I think that we're not expecting some of these major categories to actually rebound, like hotel, motel, as well as our licenses and permits. Although permits are actually doing well, but when we say licenses, we're talking about not just business licenses, but also alcohol licenses as well. So, we're expecting probably to exceed what our projected deficit will be, but we'll be able to provide you a clear picture, in our next FEC meetings when we'll be presenting the results of the second quarter, which will reflect where our year-end projections were actually at. But it's going to be a challenge, Madam Chair.
I have myself on mute. Thank you. I appreciate that. And definitely next month would love to get into this a little bit deeper as we're halfway through the year and we see which way things are trending. Well, thank you, Mr. CFO, and thank you, Ms. Daniel, for the update. That concludes our presentations and reports. We do have a communication from our city auditor, Amanda Noble, which is 21C0020, a communication from Danielle Hampton, Chair, Audit Committee, submitting the performance audit report, controls over CARES Act and FEMA funding in response to COVID-19.
Good afternoon. This is Amanda Noble, City Auditor, here to present the results of our audit. The CARES Act was signed into law March 27th, 2020, creating the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The city received $88 million from the Department of Treasury in the Coronavirus Relief Funds and has the ability to apply for FEMA public assistance reimbursements for eligible expenditures. The audit reviews the appropriateness, existence, and design of internal controls to ensure funding is spent in accordance with federal law. Next slide, please. The The audit focused on the following risk areas. Is the design of controls appropriate to ensure CARES Act funding is spent in accordance with federal law? Are controls in place to ensure documentation is sufficient to support FEMA public assistance grant requests for reimbursement? And are controls operating as designed? The scope of our audit was March 1st, 2020 through October 1st, 2020. Our audit methods included assessing laws, regulations, and city policies and procedures relevant to coronavirus-related expenses, reviewing best practices from other cities, compiling workflows of CARES and FEMA reimbursement processes to identify controls in place and potential gaps, participating in a walkthrough of Landmark Consulting LLC's QuickBase dashboard to understand the processes the city has in place to manage expenses, reconciling spending recorded in Oracle to the dashboard, comparing hazard pay payments to the city policy, reviewing the city's contract with United Way of Greater Atlanta to document controls established in the contract, reviewing presentations the Department of Finance made to FEC to understand public information available, and interviewing city staff from Finance, Landmark Consulting, Human Resources, and Procurement to understand the roles of the various city departments and function of the consultants. Next slide. This slide provides some background on the CARES Act. So as you know, Atlanta received $88 million in CARES Act funding. The CARES Act established the Coronavirus Relief Fund and appropriated $150 billion overall to the fund. The state of Georgia received $4.1 billion. Of this, $3.5 billion was paid directly to governments, to the state, and another $614 million was dispersed to metro Atlanta governments with 500,000 or more residents. The CARES Act states that payments from the fund may only be used to cover costs that are 1, necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. 2, not accounted for in the budget most recently approved as of March 27, 2020. And 3, incurred between March 1st, 2020 and December 30th, 2020. The initial guidance was that CARES Act funds not spent by December 30th, 2020 would be returned to the U.S. Treasury, but that deadline was extended. The mayor established a group to develop a framework for eligible uses of the funds and recommended allocation. The City Council approved the spending plan June 15, 2020 in ordinance number 20-0-1362. The Chief Financial Officer has the authority to transfer up to $1.5 million between expense categories without further council approval, and we show the expense categories on the next slide. Of the $88 million in CARES Act funding, $59 million is managed by external city partners. The city is paying the funds directly to the external partner to provide direct services, but the city is still responsible for reporting and monitoring compliance. Next slide. These are the expense categories. The city categorized CARES expenses by the priority areas shown in the table, which is Exhibit 2 on page 5 of the report. The provision of economic support, the $44 million, includes expenditures related to consumer grant programs to prevent eviction and assist in preventing homelessness, primarily run through United Way of Greater Atlanta, and expenditures related to provision of grants to small businesses to reimburse the cost of business interruption caused by required closures, run primarily through Invest Atlanta. The public health measures include expenses for homeless populations provided to mitigate COVID-19 effects and enable compliance with public health precautions managed by Partners for Home, Inc. Also, expenses to improve telework capabilities for public employees to enable compliance with public health precautions managed by AIM. Expenses for food delivery to residents, including, for example, senior citizens and other vulnerable populations to enable compliance with health precautions managed by the mayor's office. Expenses to facilitate distance learning, including technological improvements in connection with school closures managed by parks. And costs related to compliance with public health measures and protocols within public facilities as managed by Department of Enterprise Asset Management. The payroll expenses include payroll for public safety, public health, human services, and similar employees whose services are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID-19 public health emergency. These are managed through payroll and HR. Medical expenses include the cost of providing COVID-19 testing and tracing managed by the city's chief health officer and Fulton County Board of Health. And then public health expenses include expenses to acquire and distribute medical and protective supplies, including sanitizing products and personal protective equipment, managed by emergency preparedness, expenses for state and local governments to communicate and enforce public health orders, managed by the Executive Office of Communications, expenses for technical assistance to local authorities, managed by emergency preparedness, and expenses to disinfect public areas and other facilities, again, managed by Department of Enterprise Asset Management. And the last category, other, includes any other related expenses reasonably necessary to the function of government to satisfy eligibility criteria. So that could include the cost of monitoring, which the Department of Finance Office of Risk Management is in charge of. Next slide. This slide provides some background on FEMA funding. The city has also been allocated funding through FEMA. FEMA's public assistance program provides supplemental grants to state, tribal, territorial, and local governments and certain types of private nonprofits so communities can quickly respond to and recover from major disasters or emergencies. These expenses include personal protective equipment for city employees, expenses for cleaning facilities, and COVID-19 related overtime for employees. So the categories do overlap with CARES Act eligible expenses. In response to COVID-19, the city identified an immediate need for funding. FEMA provided the city with $1.6 million in expedited funding for emergency protective measures in July 2020. So the city's total cost estimate was $4.2 million, and the expedited funding was in advance of a portion of expected reimbursable costs. FEMA requires support for reimbursable expenses, and the FEMA policy guidance states that FEMA may require additional information or documentation from the city to evaluate eligibility and reasonableness of costs. Next slide. So this slide summarizes our findings. The city has generally designed controls to ensure CARES Act funding and FEMA reimbursements are spent in accordance with federal law, although we noted some gaps in the framework that could lead to errors. Due to the circumstances of the COVID-19 virus, the city was required to put a framework of controls in place quickly to manage related expenses to reasonably comply with the federal funding guidelines. The city did a good job getting these controls in place. The city hired Landmark Consulting, LLC, to provide assistance and support for federal grants and compliance management. Landmark maintains an online database of grant sources and expenses and reviews supporting documentation for compliance with federal guidance. The city also uses SharePoint to house supporting documentation related to the spending of federal funds received. The city has established a process to monitor and report the spending to city council, and also has submitted the required status reports to federal government agencies. While the control design appears adequate to ensure compliance, we noted potential risks. We identified a few weaknesses that had not been flagged by current controls. It's possible that ineligible city employees received hazard pay in error in July, August, and September 2020. We recommend the Chief Financial Officer work with the Acting Commissioner of Human Resources to document their monthly review process for hazard pay and store the documentation on the SharePoint site. We also recommend the Chief Financial Officer review the 25 employees who received more than $1,500 in hazard pay over the 3 months for compliance with the city's hazard pay policy. And finally, uncorrected issues that we raised in our 2019 audit of citywide overtime could pose problems if the city seeks FEMA reimbursement of overtime costs related to the COVID-19 emergency. Next slide. So federal programs require local governments to establish a process to ensure transparency on how funds are used. As I said, the city hired a consulting firm to assist in management responsibilities, which is allowable under the CARES Act. The city hired Landmark Consulting, LLC to provide assistance and support for federal grant and compliance management, but the city is ultimately responsible for ensuring compliance with the guidelines. Landmark Consulting reviews compliance with city transactions for CARES Act spending and FEMA reimbursements and tracks spending and status of compliance reviews through an online dashboard. The dashboard provides information on purchase orders and invoices and a running total of expenses updated at least weekly. Landmark's contract for the city states that the firm will provide assistance and support with specific scope of services, including providing advice for maximizing cost recovery, funding, compiling and summarizing costs for presentations, developing a document management plan and funding strategy to identify eligible grant activities across departments, attending meetings, negotiating and presenting grant applications, preparing correspondence and written performance and status reports, preparing and conducting closeout processes, providing updates on project development, formulation and processing, preparing, submitting, and tracking federal grant program applications, obtaining all costs and backup documentation from city departments, and reviewing eligibility and justifications to ensure eligible activities are identified, quantified, and presented. Also reviewing contracts and procurement documentation, force account labor, equipment, and other records to support preparation and presentation of applications, grant applications, and other eligible activities. Next slide. The city has submitted the reports prepared by Landmark to the City Council and also to the Office of Inspector General, and has submitted the reports to the Coronavirus Relief Fund to the Department of Treasury. We reviewed the filings submitted in October 2020. Next slide. This slide shows Exhibit 8 on page 23 of the report. Hazard pay was 15% of the CARES Act spending through September 30th, 2020. The city spent a little more than $13 million on hazard pay, which was then the total amount allocated to payroll expenses from the CARES Act. From July through September 2020, 4,904 employees received hazard pay related to the COVID-19 emergency. Of the 4,904 employees, 79 received over $500 in a single month, which could include retroactive payments, and 25 employees received more than $1,500 in total hazard payments from CARES Act over 3 months. We also noted potential anomalies in positions of employees who received the payments. For example, 10 employees in data reporting analyst positions received hazard pay. Also, 71 ATL 311 employees who are eligible for telework received hazard pay. According to Administrative Order number 2020-7, signed March 30th, 2020, mission-critical employees who are unable to perform work remotely are eligible up to $500 monthly in hazard pay and compensatory time. The Acting Commissioner of Human Resources described the monthly validation process between HR and payroll to ensure hazard payments are correct, and explained that some of the employees who are in positions eligible for remote work could have been assigned to different tasks during the emergency. We requested additional information to support the hazard pay, such as documentation of work assigned or telework eligibility status, but have not yet received the information, so we were unable to confirm compliance with the city's hazard pay policy in all cases. Next slide. These are, again, our recommendations. We recommend the Chief Financial Officer work with the Acting Commissioner of HR to document the monthly review process of hazard pay and store the documentation on the SharePoint site with other supporting documents. And we recommend that the CFO and Acting Commissioner of HR review the 25 employees who received over $1,500 in hazard pay over the 3 months to ensure there were no errors. Management agreed with both recommendations and expected to have them implemented next month. Next slide. And finally, our prior audit work on overtime identified risks related to poor timekeeping records across most city departments. We also found that police paid overtime more generously than required by FLSA. Both of these issues could pose difficulties if the city was going to seek FEMA reimbursement for overtime expenses. The city hadn't sought FEMA reimbursement of overtime during the scope of our audit, but the finance staff told us that they would if there were eligible expenses. FEMA requires eligible costs to be both documented and reasonable. We recommended in our 2019 report, citywide overtime, that the city enforce the FLSA and and city policies by paying sworn officers for premium overtime after employees have worked 171 hours in the 28-day cycle, and that the overtime calculation should not include leave taken as hours worked. We also recommended the Chief Operating Officer and Human Resources Commissioner require departments to maintain documentation to support prior approval and justification of overtime hours. And I don't think these recommendations have been implemented yet. Next slide. I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, colleagues, does anybody, let's see, Mr. Shook, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered if we had a response from management.
Who would you like to hear from? Finance, HR?
Well, it sounds like for the recommendations to be followed through upon, it kind of sounds like mostly HR, but also COO.
Good afternoon. This is Jeffrey Norman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Council Member Shook and members of the Finance Executive Committee. Did have an opportunity, just wanted to provide a couple of details in response to what the auditor has already shared. And so first wanted to address the issue relative to eligibility and whether or not their controls were sufficient. For example, I know there was a note relative to payment of 311 employees. There were also some information management employees that were in fact eligible. If you remember at the outset of the telework deployment, there were some individuals who prior to being put into a telework deployment actually still were reporting physically to work. That was true for our 311 employees as well as some members of our information management staff. They subsequently went into a full telework deployment, and once they were put into a full telework deployment, they were no longer eligible to receive those hazard pay payments. But the payments that they did receive were to compensate them for that period of time upon which they were still at risk for exposure for physically reporting to work. The same is true when it was noted about anomalies relative to pay. We did receive the position and names of those individuals who may have received more than $500 in pay. And as indicated, there were some employees who had an accrued balance that was $1,500 or $1,500 plus. For that pool of individuals, the majority of those individuals, if you remember, there was a portion of time that we retroactively applied through March. It was $500 eligibility for those payments. As you can imagine, in the deployment of that, we did find that there were some individuals who actually were physically reporting to work. And because they did not receive those payments, obviously those were reported up through the department, ultimately pushed to HR. And we made sure that those individuals received their retroactive payments since they nonetheless were exposed due to the COVID virus, much like their peers who were receiving those payments. So those things, we do have a process in place. We did identify at the outset those positions that would be eligible. And clearly for any employee who is required to continue to function as a mission critical employee, we do want to make sure that they receive those financial incentives appropriately due to that exposure, which is why we have had retroactive payments when we have discovered individuals have not received those. But as you can see, that has been a very small
number of the employees, when that number has ranged up through approximately 3 to 64% of our workforce population. And so that has gone as high as somewhere around 5,400 employees at any given time. And we continue to monitor that, and we do go through with the Department of Finance on a monthly basis to make sure that we validate eligibility on a monthly basis. And lastly, I did hear a note relative to the findings from the 2019 overtime report. We have been made aware of the need to close those out. Those recommendations were not completed under the previous commissioner. I would note that the police department did go back and significantly enhance their internal standard operating procedure to address those overtime issues, and HR is in the process of evaluating the citywide overtime policy so we can make sure that that same level of detail and guidance is provided to all of our other operating departments. And so that's the basic overview on those comments, but obviously I'm available to answer any specific questions.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair. At the appropriate time, someone else can make a second to file, but for now, I'll just go ahead and make a motion to file. Thank you.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
All right, that is 6 yeses, 0 no's. The audit report has been accepted and filed. It brings us to our consent agenda where we have 2 first reads. Would you mind reading those in for me, please, Ms. Timpson-Wright?
Yes, item number 2 is 21-0121, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or her designee to exercise renewal option number 1, Special Procurement FC 9471, advertisement placed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in accordance with Charter Section 3635.3 on behalf of the Atlanta City Council and Administration in an amount not to exceed $99,000.00 annually to ratify services rendered in connection with the agreement beginning February 3rd, 2021, in accordance with Section 21163, subsection C of Article 10, Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta, Code of Ordinances, all contracted work to be charged to pay.
She keeps talking about next lesson. I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
2. Item number 3 is 21-0122. It's an ordinance authorizing the mayor or her designee in accordance with Section 21163C, Article 10, Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, to ratify cooperative purchasing agreement FC 9726, wireless communication devices and voice and data services with Verizon Wireless Services, LLC, on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Information Management, and exercise renewal number 2 for a term of 1 year effective retroactively from January 31st, 2021 through January 30th, 2022, in an amount not to exceed $3,435,042.25. All contracted work to be charged to and paid from fund numbers listed herein and for the purposes.
Thank you very much. So those 2 items will run their course and come back to us in 2 weeks. Brings us to our regular agenda. And as I stated at the beginning, I'm going to jump around a little bit here because there are some speakers who have time commitments today. So we're going to go all the way down, and I'm going to find Mr. Selden's paper so he can get back to the airport. It is it item 30? Nope. Is it item 40? Yes. 21-0084, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or her designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to enter into lease agreements with various airlines and airline support companies for cargo warehouse and office support facilities located at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, waiving the lease of city-owned real property requirements contained in Section 2-1547, Article 10, Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta, Code of Ordinances, as well as any other conflicting code provisions and for other purposes. This was heard by Transportation, but due to the waiver of the lease of the city-owned property requirements contained in the Procurement and Real Estate Codes, it got referred out of that committee to our committee today. So I will make a motion to approve. Mr. Selden has hung around if anybody has questions for him on this paper.
Where is this?
I'm sorry. It is all the way down on page 17 towards the bottom of referred from other committees. It's item 40-210-0084.
Mine only goes as far as item 38, but
oh, oops.
That's okay. Second.
All right. If nobody has questions for Mr. Selden, let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
This item is favorable. 6 yeses, 0 noes. Ms. Kempson, right? Is that the only airport paper we have?
Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Then, just to make it even more complicated, I'm going to go up to, this was on the held papers. It's item 36. If you have the paper copy, it's page 15, and it's 210-0082. And there is a substitute in the packet. This is the infrastructure spending paper. Let's see. So this is 210-0082, an ordinance by council members J.P. Matsakite, Howard Shook, Andre Dickens, Matt Borland, Amir Faroki, Dustin Hillis, is substituted by Finance Executive Committee. An ordinance to amend Chapter Subpart A, Article 6, Chapter 3, Section 6-315B, Subsection 3 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for the purpose of increasing the 3.5% appropriation of the City of Atlanta general budget for the Public Infrastructure Maintenance and Improvement account to 5% in order to ensure adequate annual dedicated capital account funding for routine maintenance, repair, and replacement of public infrastructure and for other purposes. I'm going to make a motion to bring forward the substitute. Mr. Matsakite is here to provide any information. Mr. Matsakite, do you want to explain what the substitute does before we vote on it?
Okay. Sure will. Yeah, I'll second bringing forward the substitute, but I would like to explain. We had this paper before us and spoke a little bit about it last time, and then held it. I think we all know that our transportation infrastructure is in need of repair and a lot of money. The commissioner of ADOT, to our transportation committee said that he estimated around $900 million was the amount that we needed to really repair and get our transportation infrastructure in place. And I started thinking about, what could we do? There's not going to be one thing that we can do, but somebody in the prior council had a really good idea about putting a little money away every single year and earmarking that to spend it for our roads, our sidewalks, our bridges, all of those things that we know are in desperate need of funding. And my thought was to, have that increase from its current 3.5% to 5% over 3 years, and that would be 0.5% per year. I got some feedback from the administration regarding doing this in a time where we have some financial challenges due to COVID, and I think that was good feedback. I worked with the finance department to add in language, which is what is in your substitute, to make sure that the city would be in a position financially to have these increases. So you'll see in the substitute that it does two things. It makes sure that we have adequate reserves and that we're not dipping into reserves to do this. And second, it makes sure that revenue has increased so that our financial trajectory is going in the right direction. So with that, I believe that we can do this in a financially responsible way. It might mean that we would, in 1 year, if finances weren't there, that we paused and waited for the next year to implement an increase. But I think that's fine. So that's what this substitute does. It also makes it clear that this would be in a dedicated account for capital expenditures. This is not meant to fund the personnel of any department. This is really meant to be in the ground and addressing the infrastructure needs that we have. So that's what this substitute that is in your packet and we have before us does.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let's vote on bringing. Oh, Mr. Shook.
That's fine. Let's vote on bringing it before us, and then I'll have a comment.
Okay.
That's all right.
Let's do that. Let's vote on bringing the substitute forward, and then we can have further discussion.
The vote is open.
Hi, this is Archie Brown. I was bounced off and trying to log back in. I vote yes.
Okay. So that's 6 yeses, 0 no's. The substitute is now before us. Mr. Shook.
Yeah, I want to thank Mr. Matskite for a couple of things. Number one, acting to acknowledge what the constituents are saying, which is obviously crime and public safety is the number one concern. But, man, a surprisingly loud second place response is infrastructure. And it just can't be ignored. And, yeah, we're not in the best financial shape right now. We've weathered these storms before, and we'll do so again. But again, Mr. Matskite's to be commended for kind of working out a safety net to where kind of we're more comfortable about when and to what extent we resume doing this. And, it's a question of priorities, so infrastructure just has to be rated way up there. And so I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shook. Ms. Matskite, does this need to be advertised now? What needs to happen through the next step on this legislation?
Yes, it does. And I'll defer to Ms. Kimson-Wright, who can outline all of the steps, but it is a change to the charter, so it would need to be advertised.
Okay, Ms. Kimson-Wright, do we need another motion, or will it to put it back on held, or will it stay on held?
No, we don't need another motion. We substituted it, and it will remain in the held section.
Okay, so we don't need to do anything else today, and the process is in the works to go through the advertisement that's required for charter amendments?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to do one last out of order piece of business, which is to go to our impact fee paper. I think we have a presentation on this paper. So, find it. Ms. Kimson-Wright, what do you know what item number it is?
It's number 39. It's referred from other committees, 2100096.
Okay, I got it. And it has already been substituted in CD, so we don't need to substitute it now, correct?
Correct. However, we did receive an amendment to attach an updated Exhibit A, which is the actual 2020 Development Impact Fee Study.
Okay. Why don't we get an update from, I don't know who's going to present, if Ms. Sudafal or who can give us an update, and then they can also tell us about what the amendment is for Exhibit A, and then we will amend it and vote on it. I guess I should read the caption first. So it's item number 39 under section O, referred from other committees. It is 21O0096, a substitute ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to adopt the 2020 Development Impact Fee Study and Ordinance Update CIE Amendment in compliance with the requirements of the Georgia Planning Act of 1989 and for other purposes. So I will turn it over to Ms. Sudafal or whoever is going to speak to this paper to let us know where we stand on the impact fees.
Good afternoon, council members. This is Janet E. Sudafal, Deputy Commissioner, Department of City Planning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. As you stated, Chairman, the bill that you have before you was adopted and was approved by the CDHS committee yesterday. And so what you have before you is an amended version from the work session that was held last week. And we have with us Tiffany Cope, who is the Impact Fee Coordinator, who will lead you through a presentation that will outline some of the recommendations that have been revised since the work session. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tiffany to walk you through the presentation.
All right. Thank you. And I'm just going to quickly ask anybody who's not speaking, if you'll use your phone, we're getting a little feedback, which makes it hard to hear. All right, we are ready for the presentation.
All right, thank you all. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tiffany Cope, Impact Fee Coordinator with the Department of City Planning. Today we will cover the Impact Fee Study and Ordinance Update. We will provide an overview of the program, discuss the need for an update, and review final recommendations. Next slide, please. So what is the purpose of an Impact Fee program? When there's new development in an area, it increases the number of people who will now occupy that area, consequently creating a greater demand for additional public facilities. Facilities such as transportation, public safety services, and recreational facilities. And what are impact fees? An impact fee is a one-time fee imposed by a local government on a new or proposed development project to pay for all or a portion of the cost of providing public services to the new development. The collection of impact fees is important not only because impact fees help fund the supply of public facilities to meet the demand created by new development, but they also help to alleviate some of the financial burden to taxpayers of covering developmental costs. Impact fees also creates an additional stream of revenue for the city. However, the expenditure of impact fees must adhere to several guidelines and restrictions put into place under the Georgia Development Impact Fee Act. Specifically, impact fees can only be used on improvements that expand system capacity and cannot be used to maintain existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. So why does the city need to update the existing impact fee program? The driving force behind this update is that Atlanta's fees have not changed in over 25 years, and we are well below our peers. Atlanta's impact fee program was adopted back in 1993. As you can see from the fee chart, Atlanta is well below the national average and well below our peers around the nation. Even in relation to nearby jurisdictions such as Roswell, Alpharetta, and Sandy Springs, you can see our fees do not adequately align with current growth and development. Next slide.
The 2020 Impactv update falls into three main categories. Number one, fee levels. Fee levels are updated in the new study, of course, because current levels are based on 1993's land use, construction costs, and scope. Land use types are updated to reflect current types in the city. Transportation service area is reduced from citywide into three smaller service areas, which align with the park areas. And currently, fee levels vary by service area. However, this update creates the uniformity of fees citywide. The second category is policy. The methodologies are updated to expand the scope of what improvements can be funded to meet the needs of a growing city. For example, park scope is expanded to include spend for not only land acquisition, but also for improvements such as gyms, multi-use trails, and picnic facilities. Transportation scope is also expanded to enable spend on collector roads and sidewalks, more permissible under DEFA guidelines. The study also recommends updating the affordable housing and economic development exemption language. And the third category is program administration. This update also aims to improve transparency with expanded annual reporting and engaging the advisory committee to evaluate Impactv funded projects for any perceived inequities. Next slide. As part of the update to improve program administration, in 2019, City Council reconstituted the Development Impactv Advisory Committee. The committee was reestablished to assist the city with evaluating and updating our current program and to ensure the update addressed methods to improve transparency. The committee also advised on fee structure, and as mentioned, they also report on perceived inequities. The advisory committee consists of 5 members who represent the development communities as well as the private sector. And the members are as follows. We have Malloy Peterson as chair, Kevin Green from Midtown Alliance, Jim Brown from JWB Properties, Stacy McCoy with SciComm Infrastructure Services, and Roderick Teachy with Wingate Companies. Next slide. As part of the advisory committee's role to advise on Impactv policy decisions, they recently met to discuss and vote on recommendations that required finalizing. Those recommendations include timeline for adopting a new fee study and associated ordinance, potential phasing or percentage adoption of recommended fee levels, determine guidelines for grandfathered development already in progress, select preferred single-family fee structure option, develop reporting structure to improve transparency on proximity, and lastly, finalize affordability and economic development language in the ordinance. So with that, next we will cover each recommendation. We will review the staff's preliminary recommendation and note if any updates were made to those recommendations, as well as review the advisory committee, how they voted for each. Next slide. Recommendation number 1, preferred timelines to implement any fee changes associated with development impact fees. The staff's preliminary recommendation is to implement any changes 6 months from date of adoption. And the advisory committee voted in favor of this recommendation. Next slide. Recommendation number 2, preferred time frame to phase in 100% of the adopted fee levels for development impact fees. The preliminary recommendation is to phase in fees over 2 years with 3 increases over that time frame. In the first year, a 50% increase will take effect. Second year at 75%, and third year and beyond, 100% of the rate set forth. And the advisory committee did not vote in favor of this recommendation. Next slide. This chart demonstrates an example of phasing in the total fee at varying percentages over different time horizons. You will see the staff recommendation indicated by the red marker, which phases in the rate set forth beginning at 50%, then gradually increasing to 75%, then 100% as previously mentioned. Next slide. This chart shows the second option of the phase-in approach using the rate change. So the difference between the current rate and the proposed new rate divided over the number of increases. Next slide. Recommendation number 3. How should we deal with near-term projects in progress that may be financially impacted by rate changes? The staff recommendation is not to develop any special guidelines for projects already in progress, since a 6-month notice would be given prior to implementation of the first fee increase. And the advisory committee voted in favor of this recommendation. Next slide. Recommendation number 4, preferred single-family home rate structure. In other words, rates based on square footage or a single flat rate for single-family homes. The preliminary recommendation was in favor of the flat rate structure. However, after receiving feedback from various stakeholders and taking a much deeper dive into the pros and cons of each approach, the staff has updated their recommendation in favor of the tiered rate structure. And the advisory committee voted in favor of the preliminary recommendation of the flat rate structure for single-family homes. Next slide. Recommendation number 5, suggestions to improve transparency of the program. The preliminary recommendation is for the Department of Finance to provide the Impactv annual report to the mayor and council by June 30th of each year. And the portion of the annual report relating to transportation impact fees shall be referred to the advisory committee to again report on any perceived inequities. And lastly, the three service areas, will be used to conduct a distribution analysis to understand the relationship between impact fee collections and expenditures. Next slide. Recommendation number 6, changes to the affordable housing exemption language. The preliminary recommendation is to extend a 20% exemption on the following guidelines presented. And developments must be affordable for 20 years. The staff has updated their position on this recommendation. I'm still in favor of the 20% exemption. However, the development must only be affordable for 10 years. And the advisory committee voted in favor of the preliminary recommendation of a 20% exemption and a 20-year affordability standard. Next slide. Recommendation 6A, should affordable housing exemptions apply to the entire development or just the affordable portion? The preliminary recommendation states the affordable housing exemption should only apply to the portion that is affordable, and the advisory committee voted in favor of this recommendation. And lastly, recommendation 6B, changes to the preliminary economic development exemption language. The preliminary recommendation provided a 100% exemption based on the presented guidelines. However, the staff has updated their recommendation to align the criteria for this exemption with Invest Atlanta and to match the affordable housing language to provide a 20% exemption. Thank you all for your time and support, and I yield the floor back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any speakers in the queue. Did we have, had anybody made a motion to, no, I see the speakers. Mr. Schickowitz-Moreland, can we, did we amend the paper already? Ms. Kempson?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Schickowitz-Moreland, can we amend the paper first, or do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to make a motion to amend to update the attachment, and then I'll turn it over to you all.
Well, I'll let the CD chair second that.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote on the amendment.
Vote is open.
Councilmember Archibald, are you still offline?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Is there a question? I was offline for a minute.
We're voting on the motion to amend.
I don't see. Yeah, I don't see.
I think we just counted you as a yes.
That'd be great. That's true.
Okay.
That's great. Good. Thank you.
Okay. So 6 yeses, 0 no's on the amendment, and now Councilmember Shook first, and then after Shook, Westmoreland.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Well, I'm always bitterly disappointed in myself when I throw out more than one bouquet per meeting, but I do want to say that this is one tough, complicated subject, as we all now know, and I just want to thank and recognize the administration, the planning department, for the advisory committee, and the chair for bringing this to ground. Now, I do have a question, and I should know, but I don't. Have we enshrined either in this piece of legislation or perhaps something we've already done requiring us to review this subject in a shorter time frame than every 30 years?
I do not know the answer to that. Does Mr. Westmoreland, do you, or if not, Ms. Sitafall?
The answer is yes, but I'll defer to the administration.
Or Ms. Cope?
I don't know. This is Tiffany Cope speaking. I'm not exactly sure if we have anything written in any of the provisions that puts a timeline on it, but certainly I would hope that it wouldn't be another 30 years. We are working on a phase 2 that may be in a pipeline after the state rolls out their updates. So over the next couple years, we may be doing another comprehensive update. So hopefully that answers your question. If anyone else wants to add anything to it, please feel free.
And, you know, I had kind of sort of thought we had, but on further reflection, I may be thinking about the frequency with which we do our experience studies relative to pensions. And so I'll stop right here, right now, and just kind of throw it out to the body, if it makes sense, to add an amendment that to do this every as a conversation starter. I'll just say 5 years. Thank you.
Councilmember Shook, thank you for that. This is Tiffany Cope speaking again. I just did receive information from our law department that we do have that in place to review every 5 years. So you are right on the mark.
Okay, well, it was almost like I was there. Thank you. Motion to approve amendment.
All right. Do you have any other comments, Mr. Shook?
I hope not. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Westmoreland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments. I want to echo all of the thanks that Councilmember Shook just offered to folks, especially to Ms. Sitafell and Ms. Talon and Ms. Cope for all of your work on this over the last several months. I do want to also acknowledge there's been a lot of conversations with stakeholder groups, and probably the most lively conversations came around the recommendation number 2 in terms of the phase-in with partners like Campus Quality Growth and the Homeowners Association. And yesterday, CDHS voted 6-0 to send this our way with the phase-in recommendation that came from the staff. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of those people and entities that conversed with us on a whole lot of different topics over the last several months, and I'm excited that this will be hopefully on Monday's consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Metcalfe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo Councilmember Westmoreland, Councilmember Shook for their praise for the folks that worked on this committee and this process, and to the planning department in getting this through. I know it's no fun to have an increase in fees. This is a significant increase that we're going to phase in, but I did want to note that the city of Atlanta will still be, it looks like for single families, about 75% of the cost of building in Alpharetta, Sandy Springs, and the national average. So we still will be at the lower end of the competitive range, and so we will be a very competitive place to do business and for folks to come and live and enjoy the city. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
Well, Mr. Masterkite just said something that I was going to point out also, that he just said it. So I'll say ditto to you, Mr. Masterkite, in terms of where the city is going to be compared to other cities. So we still are a place that people can come and develop. I also just want to thank the staff. I think Mr. Westmoreland, I know I've been on council for 17 years, and Mr. Shook has been on it longer than me. And this impact fee thing has been something that has been continuously just pushing it down the road. In the meantime, our city is in major need of redevelopment in terms of all of these things, in terms of impact fees. And again, the charts show in terms of other cities, other cities next to us and across the country, how 1993 is our last time. I just want to say hooray, the fact that we are finally here at a point that we can actually come up to a par, that we can get more things done in the city. And as we just talked about, even the legislation we just did before that was Mr. Masterkite's legislation about transportation, sidewalks, roads, streets, the whole 9 yards. And so I'm happy for where we are. Congratulations to everybody. I want to thank everybody for getting us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shepherd. And I'll just echo those thoughts of this has been a big undertaking. So thank you to everybody in planning, Ms. Sidafal, Ms. Talon, Ms. Cope. And thank you to our industry committee that got together and did this. And I also want to thank CD, and particularly the chair, Mr. Westmoreland, because he got all of this worked out before it got to finance exec, and we really didn't have to do any of the hard work other than stick an exhibit on there. So I know that CD has several big items on its plate, and your committee's done great work in getting all of those moved forward. So, Mr. Westmoreland, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, y'all ain't seen nothing until we get to trees, but I'll make a motion to approve.
All right. Seconded by Shook. Let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
You got to live in the moment.
Yeah.
Councilmember Archibald?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's 6 yeses, 0 noes. This item is favorable. All right.
Madam Chair, this is Tiffany Cope once again. I'm sorry to interrupt. I do want to thank you all for your support, and I do want to send a special thank you out to Jonathan Futrell from our law department as well. He's played a huge role in getting us to where we are with this impact fee legislation. So I just wanted to quickly say that. Thank you again.
Thank you for doing that. We don't always know who's doing all the behind the scenes work on it. So thank you to Mr. Futrell for getting this all tied together. All right, let's move back up to the top of the agenda and try to go in order now. So let's go up to item number 4, which is 21-00099, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer on behalf of the City of Atlanta to create a consolidated trust fund, which will combine the tennis center's trust accounts as indicated herein and for other purposes. And I believe we have Mr. Voss with us to tell us about this legislation.
Doug Voss, correct? Can you hear me okay, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, and good afternoon to members of council. This is Doug Voss, Director of Parks. This legislation serves several purposes. Currently, DPR manages the 5 tennis centers. When the city took over management, we had to evaluate the needs of the sites and make repairs as necessary, and some of them were immediate. Each tennis center has historically had its own trust accounts to fund these types of projects. And DPR is charged with ensuring that we have adequate services, supplies, and staffing for each of these centers. Creating a consolidated trust fund, we believe, allows DPR to complete tasks based on equity and priority. Since we took over in August, we've actually completed a number of these projects. We've resurfaced all 9 courts at Joseph McGee. We've done fencing repair at Sharon Lester, lighting repair at Bitsy Grant. We have scheduled the replacement of the clay at Bitsy Grant Clay Courts, and have done pressure washing at Piedmont, Washington, and Chastain. So this proposal to consolidate the trust has been reviewed with the Department of Finance, who supports the closing of trusts that may have limited activity, and it also allows us the ability to leverage funds based on priorities, which would enhance our maintenance and efficiency. The legislation would allow also for the collective receipt of revenues into the consolidated trust, much as we do for youth athletics and summer camps and other programs. So we look forward to the ability to having a consolidated trust to allow for more efficient accounting. And it kind of works in line with other cleanup efforts that finance has already started that would allow designated expenses to be paid from trust funds rather than impacting the general fund. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, and thank you for your consideration.
All right, colleagues, any questions for Mr. Voss?
Approval, sure. Councilmember Matzekite has a question.
Okay.
And I apologize, I've been kicked off, so I couldn't indicate my speaker button. Mr. Voss, and my question really is around Bitsy Grant. There's been a lot of, issues with the clay courts there in terms of making sure that they are in good working order. And I know, Mr. Bond even put in some legislation because they were in great need. How would you evaluate, and have we evaluated the tennis centers that these funds were generated at, and what are the needs at those tennis centers?
We have actually done, to your point, we've done exactly that. We have a list that we're actually continuing to compile as we speak. Our first blush, when we went to the site, some of them were obvious. The resurfacing of the courts at McGee needed to be done, and when we got out there, it was found that all the fences needed to be replaced, so we did both. With the clay courts you mentioned at Bitsy, to be honest with you, we took the recommendation from the Friends of Bitsy Grant, Mr. Peter Howell, at hand when he recommended that service be done on an annual basis. It basically replaces about 3 tons of aggregate on each of the courts, and that work could actually start as early as next week. We're trying to get it done before the spring season. So kind of the short answer is we've been doing both internal investigations at the sites, but also listening to a lot of the Friends groups. And so far, all the recommendations have been nothing but helpful, and that's a good example of one.
So do we have, the Parks Department has been to these sites and have said they are in good order and don't need this funding, or how is that?
Well, the funding would still be there. No, and I got your question. The funding would still be there. What it allows us to do is draw from one fund. You might have, so the situation at Bitsy costs a certain amount of money. We need to ensure that there's enough money in all the funds to cover the needs based on priority. And of course, the clay courts, which are our only clay courts in the city, making sure those are done right, that is a priority. As well as when we resurfaced the courts at McGee, the cracks had gotten to the point where they were almost unplayable on some of the courts, so that needed to be done as a priority. One of the smaller jobs we just finished, I think this week, or just finishing up, was pressure washing the courts. That's just a normal piece of routine maintenance, but if it's not done on a regular basis, it obviously builds up. It needs to be done immediately, which, like I said, I think it'll be done this week, if not sooner.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Sure.
Chairman.
All right.
Thank you. I think we had a motion in a second. Is that right?
Didn't have a second yet, but I'll give you one.
Okay, great. All right, so I think there was a motion by Schick, second by Westmoreland. Let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
I'll be a voice vote, Madam Chair.
Okay. And what's your vote?
Yes.
Okay. Let's put Mastercard down as a yes. All right, that's 6 yeses, 0 no's. This item's favorable. Takes us to item number 5 is 21-0100, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or her designee to exercise renewal number 1 for FC 9969 Workers' Compensation Third-Party Administration with PMA Management Corp. to provide workers' compensation third-party administration services to the City of Atlanta on behalf of the Department of Finance for a term of 2 years, retroactively effective December 26, 2020 through December 25, 2022. An amount not to exceed $2,272,478.00 to ratify services rendered in connection with the agreement beginning December 26, 2020 in accordance with Section 2-1163, subsection C of Article 10, Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, all services to be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote.
Vote is open.
Yes.
All right, that was a yes for Matt McKay. This item is favorable, 6 yeses, 0 no's. Item number 6, 21-0101, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or designee to waive certain provisions under Section 2-1541B and 2-1545B of the Code of Ordinances and authorizing the mayor or designee to enter into an agreement with Livable Buckhead to purchase 0.07 acre of land for development as a park to be located in parcel 39 of land lot 46 of the 17th Land District, City of Atlanta, Fulton County, Georgia, on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation in the amount of $101,000.00. The city's purchase price, closing cost, due diligence, signage, site security, site stabilization, fencing, and other development costs to be paid from the accounts listed here and for other purposes. And there is an amendment in your packet. Find the amendment and tell you what it does. Unless Commissioner Rowan, are you here with us, and can you tell us about this item while I'm looking for the amendment? All right.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Rowan. So this is part of the Path 400 project. This little piece allows us to connect the Gordon Bynum pedestrian bridge with the top of Miami Circle. It's I forget the distance, but it'll contain a 12-foot concrete trail with 2-foot shoulders. So it's just a connectivity piece. That seems to have been kind of the theme for the day, is trails and small pieces that are connecting existing segments.
Okay, that's great. And it looks like the amendment attaches the Livable Buckhead complete agreement. So I'll make a motion to amend.
Second.
Let's vote on the amendment.
Yes, Matt McKay.
Matt McKay was a yes. All right, there was 6 yeses, 0 no's on the amendment. Mr. Shook, is this your park or your trail?
Yes, ma'am. I will motion to approve as amended.
All right, I'm happy to second Matt McKay. Okay, let's open the vote.
Vote is open.
This item is favorable as amended, 6 yeses, 0 noes. Next item is item 7-21-0-0108, an ordinance by Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet authorizing a payment in an amount not to exceed $22,320.00 to discount mailing service from the District 11 expense account and for other purposes. And I'm happy to make a motion to approve.
Second.
Let's open the vote.
That's Kate, yes.
The vote is open.
That's Kate was a yes. All right, this item is favorable, 6 yeses, 0 noes. Brings us to section K, our resolutions. Item number 8 is 21R3156, which is a resolution by Councilmember Jennifer and I requesting that the mayor takes into consideration and funds priorities that the Atlanta City Council recommends be included in the fiscal year 2022 budget and for other purposes. I believe we have a substitute that adds a few items that is in your package. So I'll make a motion to substitute.
Yeah, I'll second that while I look up the subject.
Okay, and we're gonna hold this another cycle, so this will still welcome any priorities. All right, let's vote on the substitute.
If I can, while we're on the subject of the budget, are you in discussions with finance and the administration about, depending on where we are with COVID, how we're going to do the departmental presentations and so forth?
We have talked about the fact that we need to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I will try to provide some more information next month on what it looks like. My guess is it's going to look similar to last year, but that's just my guess.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Matsukite on the substitute.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Westmoreland, you've disappeared. All right, there you go. Let's get Matsukite as a yes. Okay, so 6 yeses, 0 noes. The item's been substituted. We're going to hold it again so that I can make sure I've heard from everybody. So I will make a motion to hold.
Second.
All right, let's vote on the motion to hold.
Matsukite, yes.
Vote is open.
Let's get Matsukite as a yes. All right, this item is held. 6 yeses, 0 noes. Ms. Kempton-Wright, when do we need to finalize this and send it on to full council?
Madam Chair, at the next finance meeting, March 10th, we can move it out of committee with no recommendation, and if there are any additional modifications to be adopted at the March 15th full council meeting.
Okay, so colleagues and any other colleagues who are on this committee who are listening in, please send me or Ms. Kempton-Wright any additional items you would like to be added next go around. And then we can also add them at the full council meeting. All right, let's see. Number 9 is 21R3204, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to enter into Amendment Number 10 to contract FC 8772 CCTV products, services, and installation with FC 8772A, Convergent Technologies LLC, FC 8772B, GC&E Systems Group, Inc., and FC 8772C, Johnson Controls, Inc., for the installation, repair, or replacement of surveillance camera systems and keyless access control devices on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation, and to add additional funding in amount not to exceed $100,000.00. All contract work shall be charged to and paid from accounts listed herein and for other purposes. Again, I believe we have an amendment that is going to update the funding account in the second resolve clause. So I'll make a motion to amend.
Second.
All right, let's vote on the amendment.
Okay, yes.
The vote is open.
Here we get Applicate as a yes. Here we go, 6 yeses, 0 no's. Mr. Voss, if you're still with us, will you just tell us where this is, where this Fema system and access is?
Sure. We and good afternoon again, Doug Voss, Director of Parks. DPR currently utilizes this contract for repair and maintenance for CCTV surveillance cameras for many park sites. This resolution would add additional funding for recreation and additional park sites. In general, we use the contract to help ensure that the existing cameras are operational and repaired as necessary, but we also look to add systems and upgrade systems when possible. The staff have done a preliminary review. Some of the sites that are trying to get done as a priority right now include Pittman, William Walker, Roselle Fan, and Peachtree Hills. But that is just a beginning list, and we have many more. We're just going to be doing them in phases. They do take a minute to make sure they're all operational and tied into the VIC when possible. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Mr. Voss? Oh, Councilmember Archibald.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Voss, a question that's come up recently is about the utilization of our grassy areas for, pick up football, soccer, frisbee, or whatever, and not so much frisbee. But do the cameras pick up the actual building only or the surrounding grounds of our facility?
Very good question. We have both. In many cases, if we have a rec center, we often use the fiber of the rec center to tie in cameras both inside and outside if the visibility is good. But we also have worked closely to put out cameras that are without a rec center. So fields, for example, can be included. Sometimes the connectivity is just kind of the issue we have to work through as well as the power source, but they can be done for both.
So if the concern is that there are some contact sports that are occurring on our fields, not that they were sanctioned or authorized by parks, but that they are in fact organically happening. Is that something that gets captured and then the police come by and say, hey, you're not socially distanced now, and so stop it? Or is that something that would not be expected to happen, that the cameras would trigger some reaction to some authority to come and say, stop, violating social distancing requirements?
Yeah, I can't think of a situation that we would have that occur at this point. We do have some cameras that allow for live feeds. Most of our camera systems are either tied into the VIC, which obviously they can pull those things up when needed, or they might, obviously capture to a server, a recorder, if you will. But I can't think of one where we have right now where we have like a perpetual live feed, unless there's a monitor in, like, say, a rec center. This is going on during, like, say, business hours.
So if after hours, it would probably not be monitored at all.
Correct. We would be, in most cases, unless it's tied with the VIC. If we know of it, we've worked, not particularly in that situation, but if we know we have an area that there's been either something reported, we have very good connection with the VIC to say, hey, if that's camera that is available, you need to keep your eyes on that, and they absolutely do.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
No problem.
Councilor Shepard.
Mr. Voss, could you go back over the list again and where you say these cameras are going again?
Sure. Right. And this list is always subject to change, but right now some of the priority ones for this group is Pittman Park, William Walker Park, Grove Park, Roselle Fan, Peachtree Hills, and Adams Park were the ones that we are trying to do in this phase.
Okay. And then I just also want to ask if did you say that most of these cameras are tied to the VIC system? They're not in a separate place somewhere where somebody else is looking at them. they actually are tied to the VIC system with the police department. Is that correct?
That is always our intent. Yes, that is correct. There are some situations that are a little tougher to get into the VIC. We have to use, for example, 5G technology or 4G technology to get there, but when possible, we always try to tie into the VIC.
Including the ones that may be on the inside of the building also, or are these just for outside cameras?
I think that's mainly with outside, but it's a very good question, and I can follow up on that one. I don't know if I know the answer to that.
All right. If you let me know, I appreciate it.
I will.
Thank you. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Shepherd. Let's see. We passed the amendment, I believe. So I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
Mr. Matsukite? This item is favorable. As amended, 6 yeses, 0 noes. Item number 10 is 21R3205, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Procurement Officer to execute Amendment number 2 with the appropriate documents to modify Sole Source Agreement FC 8910 PSSI Response CAD System Support and Maintenance Services to substitute TriTech Software Systems, Inc. for Public Safety Systems, Inc. as a party to the agreement and to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to pay outstanding invoices to TriTech Software Systems, Inc. for services rendered during the term of the agreement in an amount not to exceed $184,697.81 on behalf of the Department of Aviation, Atlanta Fire Rescue Department, and Atlanta Police Department, all contracted work to be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein, and for other purposes. And my understanding is this is because there was acquisition of the one company by the other, and that's why we need to change the name and we need to reintroduce it. Let me read my notes for 1 second. Does this need to be filed and redone as an ordinance?
Yes, Madam Chair. We're on 3105. It actually, because
we're in item number 10, 21R3205. For the payment of the outstanding invoices, does it need to, can we do that as a resolution, or does this need to be an ordinance?
No, it should be an ordinance, so we should file it, and it needs to be reintroduced to authorize the payment of outstanding invoices.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to file item number 10.
Second.
Let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
6 yeses, 0 noes. This item is filed. Item number 11 is 21R3206, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or her designee to execute amendment number 2 of Cooperative Purchasing Agreement FC 10592, Citywide Office Printer MFD Supplies and Services with Xerox Corporation to add the Department of Audit Administration as an authorized user of the agreement, an amount not to exceed $4,000, and to add funding on behalf of various departments in a total amount not to exceed $1,611,966.03, all contracted work to be charged to and paid from the funding numbers listed herein and for other purposes. All right. I'll make a motion to approve. Oh, we have an amendment. I'm sorry. The amendment is... The amendment's in the packet, and it's going to update the funding accounts on the second resolve clause. So let me make a motion to amend. Second. Thank you. Let's open the vote on the amendment.
The vote is open.
Mr. Mexico to Mr. Shook.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Have you been kicked off the system again?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, I have voted. I'm sorry, I was kicked off the system, but I'm now back.
No worries. Okay, 6 yeses, 0 no's on the amendment. I'll make a motion to adopt as amended.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote.
One moment. The vote is open.
All right, 6 yeses, 0 no's. This item is favorable as amended. Brings us to section 11, our dual referred items. Let me see if there's anything we didn't already get to. I don't believe so. Our held items. We are ready. Okay, held items down to item number 29, which is 2100005. Councilmember Archibald, is that ready to move? This is the pension, the appeals paper.
Is the law department on the line? There were some requirements from having a letter from the actuarial folks. I just want to make sure we have all of the pieces in place yet.
Yes,
and that may be.
Archibald, this is Carl Christie. Yes, you do have everything that you need to move the legislation.
All right, so I move that we approve this legislation.
It looks like Councilmember Overstreet wanted to be added as a co-sponsor.
That's correct. I make that amendment.
Okay.
Second.
All right, let's vote on the amendment. Okay, the amendment is 6 yeses, 0 no's.
And I move that we approve this legislation.
As amended, Shook seconds.
Okay, let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
All right, this item is favorable as amended with 6 yeses and 0 no's. All right. And thank you, and Councilmember Archibald and Councilmember Overstreet for your hard work on the pension board. Job that we're lucky to have you all willing to do that.
Thank you.
Let's see. We are down at item number 31, which is 21R 3030, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or designee to exercise rule number 2 of Cooperative Purchasing Agreement FC 9726, wireless communication devices and voice and data services with Verizon Wireless Services, LLC, on behalf of the Department of Atlanta Information Management for a term of 1 year, effective January 31, 2021 through January 30th, 2022, an amount not to exceed $3,405,795.85. All contracted work to be charged to and paid from funding members listed herein and for other purposes. And Ms. Kempson, right, the administration would like this filed.
Yes, Madam Chair, they would like to file this item. They have introduced an ordinance which will take the place of this one.
Okay, and I've lost my place. Are we in held where we are?
Yes, you're in held.
Okay. Do we have to, can I just make a motion to file, or do we have to move it off of held?
No, you just make a motion to file.
Okay, all right. So I'll make a motion to file item number 31.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote on the motion to file.
The vote is open.
All right, this item is filed. 6 yeses, 0 no's. We have done item 36. Oh, looks like our last item is the water paper. Item number 37, 21R, 3107. There is a substitute, which I'm going to read the caption because it fills in the blank. Find my water paper. The substitute reads, a resolution by Councilman Jennifer and I, to substitute by Finance Executive Committee, a resolution authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to refund customers for overpayments to water and sewer accounts in an amount of $34,551.27, all funds to be charged to and paid from Fund Department Organization and Accounts Number 5051, Water and Wastewater Revenue Fund 00001, balance sheet default 1226009, refund payable and for other purposes. So I'll make a motion to bring forward the substitute.
Second.
All right, let's vote on the substitute.
The vote is open.
All right, the substitute is before us with 6 yeses, 0 noes. A motion to approve as substituted.
Second.
All right, let's open the vote.
The vote is open.
6 yeses, 0 noes. It is favorable on substitute. We have no walk-ins. For section O, referred from other committees, we already did 39 and we already did 40. And I believe that is the end of our legislative agenda. So please do send any items for budget priorities to myself and Ms. Kempson Wright before our next meeting in 2 weeks. And I believe that is it, unless anybody has anything for the good of the committee. I will make a motion.
That this means back-to-back, no reports.
And I thank you, Mr. Shook, for your assistance with that. Anyway, I will make a motion to adjourn and see you all next week. Thanks.